All right, I'll be starting in just a minute. I just need to make sure the broadcast is going. Maybe, if you can hear me. There it goes. All right, in just a few minutes I'll be ready. I'm just making sure I got everything open and ready to go. Hopefully some people show up. Let's see here. Right now it's just me. Okay. Well, I sent out the notice to everybody to my Twitter feed. So we'll see how it goes as things get going, but just a few minutes now. Oh, hello, Yeshi. Not sure how to say that, but welcome. All right. Just one more minute. All right. All right, I think I got everything ready. And we are on episode 78. Okay. All right, time to get started. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Molehill Mountain, episode 78. And I am Zachary Knight, and Andrew Eisen is off. He's taking his Christmas vacation. He's probably on a plane or in an airport or on the road or something right now. So it's just me today. And hopefully I've got a good show for you guys. There's quite a bit of news that I wanted to cover, and and so we'll be discussing it as we go along. I guess to get started, just talking about some of the things that I've played this week. I Earlier this week, Pokemon Go rolled out a couple of new updates. They released 50 new Pokemon for Gen 3, which has been pretty good. I've caught quite a few of them. Not all 50 of them, of course. But something else that they rolled out is a new weather feature where, depending on the real life weather where you're at, it affects which Pokemon you see more often, which types. And those Pokemon that do show up more often due to the weather pattern also have boosted level and attack and defense, all that stuff. And then you also get extra Stardust. So it's been pretty cool. But so far, I haven't had a much variety of weather. It's been mostly sunny and clear, which is, let's see, plant, ground, and fire, those types. I've had a little bit of cloudy and partly cloudy. I wish it was cloudy more often because you get fighting types, and I don't get, uh, I don't see too many fighting types, and I don't have my fighting type badge. Right now, it's considered raining. There was a little bit of drizzle outside, and so it kicked off the raining stuff, and that gives me more electric types, which is a couple electric types I'm still trying to boost, and also, if a Magnemite shows up, I'm not going to complain because that's also a steel type, and I need steel types for the steel type badge. And over Christmas weekend, I should be getting snow, which means more ice and steel type, which I need more of again. So, um, and then let's see, there's also windy weather, which is the other weather pattern. Oh, windy and fog. Fog is dark types and ghosts. I don't really need any of those. But windy has flying, dragon, and one other one. I forget what it is. And I definitely need dragons. Lots of Dragonairs, Dragonites, Dratinis, and whatever other dragon types are out there. I forget what all's a dragon type these days. So that's been pretty cool. I wish there was a little more variety in weather, but you'd have to live in a special place to have that much change. But hopefully over the next few weeks, I'll see some interesting weather and patterns and get some cool stuff out of there. So far, my favorite Pokemon of Gen 3 is Electrike, which is this little green and yellow dog cat thing. I don't know what it is, and I've only seen a couple of those, and it's hasn't it's cool. I like it. I think it looks neat. Gen 2, my favorite was Teddy Ursa and Ursa Ring. I just thought it was really cool. This little teddy bear turns into a big grizzly bear. Yeah, it's just a cool thing. And Gen 1, my favorite Pokemon was actually Mankey. I like Mankey and Primate, but I think it stems more from the anime when they first introduced Mankey and Primates. I thought that episode was pretty cool. Oh, Frozen Fog! Wow, yeah. Don't know. That would be kind of an interesting experience. Don't get a whole lot of that here in Oklahoma. We get it's mostly warm all year round. Like it gets cold in the winter, but if every once in a while it just become like 60 degrees and for days on end. And we do get snow every now and then, but it usually only lasts a couple of days. And then every few years we also get freezing rain. I don't know how freezing rain will be incorporated into the app, but it'd probably just be considered rain or something. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I think I want to see what all comes out of this weather thing, because I think it adds a little variety to the game. And it's probably going to result in fewer type events for Pokemon Go, which is unfortunate because I really like it when they do type events where specific types show up for a couple of weeks. And because they last year they did a fire and ice event, which was really fun. I caught a whole bunch of Swinubs and was able to get my Poly Swine and enough candies to get a Mamoswine, I believe is what it is, when Gen 4 releases. So that was really cool. But I didn't get enough to get my gold ice badge, unfortunately. And then they've done starter events and all that stuff. So hopefully they still do events like that because those were fun. But the weather pattern might reduce the number of events they do, and they might make them a little more special, a little less type specific and more. Not sure exactly how to describe what they might do. But I do need more steel, more dragon, more ice, and more fighting. I believe those are all the types that I need at this point in the game to get my badges. But yeah, so Pokemon Go is fun. I'm still stinking it up with the raid battles. When the raids first showed up, I did a handful of raids, got a couple of Pokemon, but I have yet to be able to do a legendary raid because legendary raids are just a pain in the butt to organize. Like where I live, there's not really any good active raid communities, Pokemon Go communities, and those that do exist are focused more on the major cities. I'm in a metropolitan area, but I'm not in the metropolitan center, so I would have to travel like 20 minutes to be able to get to where people are actually doing raids, and I don't really feel like traveling that much, especially because I don't get off work until 5, and raids are over by 7 o'clock, and so I don't really have enough time to actually figure out where people are meeting and then get there, because I'll be traveling in rush hour traffic to try to get somewhere, and I'll be late, and it's annoying and stupid. So I have yet to catch a single legendary Pokemon, and probably never will unless they move them outside of the raids or they change the way the raids function so that they're less dependent on huge numbers of people. When I first started thinking about this, I actually thought about how they would do legendary Pokemon in the game before they implemented the new gyms and the raid system, and I thought of something similar to a raid, and um, but you know, being able to actually do it by yourself too, where if you got a huge group of people together, it would be it would be a lot easier, but it would still be possible to do it by yourself or with a smaller group of people. But now these raids, for a legendary raid, you have to have at minimum 15 people there, and yeah, I can't do that. That's been a near impossible for me to actually get involved with. I think the most people I ever saw at a raid that I actually participated in was 6, and not all of those people participated in the same raid group. And so yeah, so I think in my battle it was just me and 2 other people, and it was a level 3 raid, a Gengar, which we were able to do no problem. Other than that, other than Pokemon Go, I haven't played a whole lot of stuff. I recently started playing Minecraft again. I really like Minecraft. It's a fun game. It's fairly relaxing. I do get a little bit frustrated when I get swarmed by monsters, but that's kind of the point. I play in hardcore survival. That's the only way I'll play. I don't play creative, and I don't play easy mode. I like hardcore mode because it's a more of a challenge. But yeah, I do get swarmed every now and then. Since I started playing this map, I've died probably 10 times and lost tons of gear and ore and everything else. Man, I actually at one point I was trying to get trying to explore this ravine that I had found, and a creeper snuck up behind me and exploded and dropped me into some water, and I was trying to get out of the water so that I could get away from this other creeper that was showing up, but I couldn't get out of the water in time to not get exploded by this other creeper, and it turns out this water was pouring down into lava. So I wasn't too far away from my house, my base, and I went back there to try to get my stuff, and I realized once I got there that all my stuff got pushed into the lava, and that sucked. That sucked really bad, because I had probably had about 3 stacks of iron, half a stack of gold, tons of coal, full set of iron armor, a diamond pickaxe, and a bunch of other iron tools. and a bed. And this was before I finally found some sheep to drag back to my base so that I could farm and raise sheep. Um, so yeah, so I lost quite a bit of stuff and had to restart. I had to do this, like, that similar things happened several times, and I actually had one really cool experience that I have never seen before. I was in this cave and I died, and so I lost all my gear, and I couldn't get back to that cave in time to get my gear. Like, I knew I wasn't going to be able to get it all back, and so I decided I was just going to wait. And I created a new set of gear, and then I went down there and I was exploring, and I found where I had died, and there was a bunch of zombies, and I managed to lead the zombies away from the pack and was able to kill them fairly easily. And then I went back around to where I died. None of my stuff was there because it only stays for like 5 minutes, and then it despawns. But as I was exploring around that area, I ran into a skeleton that was wearing an iron chest plate and had a sword and a shield in its hands. Usually skeletons are, they'll sometimes spawn in armor, but they always have a bow and they shoot you with a bow. But this one had a sword and shield, and I thought that was crazy. And I killed it, and it dropped the sword, shield, and the chest plate. And I've never seen this before. And I think what happened is that a skeleton that was there when I died grabbed those things and actually equipped them, which I didn't know skeletons could do. I knew zombies will pick up something that they walk over. So if there's a block or an item sitting on the ground where they walk and they don't have anything in their hand, they'll pick it up. But this is the first time I've ever seen a monster actually equip something that it found, and so I thought that was really neat. I wish I had thought about it at the time, but I would have screenshot it or something so that I could show that off, because I did a search for it, and like a Google search, to see if this happens, if this is something people have encountered before, but I never found any information on it, which was very weird. But so I don't know what to say, other than, wow, that was neat. But yeah, so that's what I've been playing. I've played a little bit of Stardew Valley, haven't done a whole lot. I'm waiting patiently for the multiplayer update to drop, because they've got a bunch of new single player content as well coming along. No real information other than a couple of screenshots that they released. One is a big purple boat or ship out at the docks, and then the other one is an indoor fishing thing, and so not a whole lot of information to go on there, other than that maybe you can take a ride on this ship and go out in the middle of the ocean, do a little bit of ocean fishing in this thing. Like the ship is an open bottom ship where you can fish down into the directly beneath the boat, which would be really cool. Like a whole new area with new types of fish you can catch, like marlins or I don't know what else you can catch in the deep ocean, but marlins is the one thing that comes to mind. Sailfish, that would be really cool to catch, be able to do that, and then maybe some other areas would be nice, because there's a lot of good mods out there that expand the world of Pelican Town. They give you other houses and things to visit. But it'd be nice to see what Concerned Ape has in mind for what he would consider an official expansion. And maybe we'll get a couple new farm types as well. For my specific tastes, I like the I like the I like the forest farm. There's not a whole lot of farmable land. You could probably plant 1,200 or so crops on it if you pack it completely. I fit about 1,000 on there. That's what I do. But I really like that one because it has the foraging and stuff in it as well. The basic farm is good too. Just I think that one you can fit like nearly 3,000 crops on it. Um, but yeah, so tuna. Yes, tuna is another deep sea fish you would catch. But that one you could also catch on the docks in the game already. So, you know, I'm just trying to think of a fish you might catch deep in the ocean that doesn't already exist. But there'll probably be a little bit of overlap because some lake and river fish can be found all throughout the freshwater areas too. But each area has specific fish you can catch in just that area. But yeah, so yeah, that's what I've been playing. So let's move on to the first topic of the day that I wanted to discuss, and this is Player Unknown. They make a game called Battlegrounds, and this guy has Brendan Green. He's the developer of Battlegrounds, and also Player Unknown's Battlegrounds, but also known as PUBG. But he earlier this week, let me see, what day was this? On the 12th. So yeah, that was published on Tuesday. He had this interview with BBC in the UK about copyright, about IP law, and this interview is absolutely insane. I don't know what Brendan, what his knowledge level of IP law is, but this thing is just ripe with misinformation. There's not a single thing in here that makes any amount of sense if you have any understanding of copyright law. So he talks about, this all spins from let's see, EA. I believe it was EA. They released a new mode for Fortnite, which basically copies the PUBG formula, where a bunch of players are dumped into a giant arena and they have to fight each other until only one person is standing. And so EA published pushed out an update to their game with the same thing, and so that brought up some copyright claims from Brendan. I don't know if he ever, if they ever went ahead and did any, threatened to sue or anything like that, which hopefully he didn't. But this is what he has to say. He says, talking about PUBG, he says that this is his first quote in this article. He says, "I want other developers to put their own spin on the genre, not just lift things from our game." And and he goes on, and in another part of the article, he says, I want genres of games to grow, which is a good thing. Genres they need to grow. He says, for that to happen, you need new and interesting spins on the game mode. If it's just copycats down the line, then the genre doesn't grow and people get bored. And yeah, this I can understand. This is a valid concern. If you really feel strongly about a genre, you want people to experiment with it, expand what that genre can do. And you see this everywhere right now. So RPGs, there's so many different takes on the RPG formula. There's same thing with first-person shooters, sports games. I don't know. I'm not a big sports games fan or racing game fan. They all feel the same to me, but there's a wide variety of sports. I'm sure you could figure out new ways of playing a sport other than the real life rules. But there's all kinds of ways you can do genres. Something even as simple as a roguelike, people are doing different things, shaking up the formula and trying to make it unique. Because being unique is the only way to really stand out in a crowded genre such as a roguelike or an RPG. So this is probably the only smart thing he has to say in this article. But the article goes on and mentions how a lot of games, specifically in China, where people are just ripping off the game mode and just pumping out trash and trying to bank on his formula. And this is where things get dumb. Seriously dumb. Brendan says there's no intellectual property protection in games. In movies and music, there's IP protection, and you can really look after your work. In gaming, that doesn't exist yet, and it's something that should be looked into. Okay, first of all, that's absolutely stupid. I don't know if I could say that enough. To make the claim that there's no intellectual property protection in games is just mind-bogglingly dumb. There's plenty of intellectual property protection in games. There's plenty of it. You can get a copyright on your game. And if people copy and distribute your game, you can send DMCA notices to get that taken down. Nintendo has put down Metroid games, Mario games, Pokemon games, Zelda games. People have tried to make their own games specifically with those IPs, and Nintendo had no problem taking those out. And it's the same in music. So he's trying to make this claim that video games are somehow different from movies and music, and no, they're not. They're in the exact same boat. Just recently, somebody, I forget who it is, but you always see music lawsuits over sampling, where you take a section of a track or something from some other song and put it in your own song. And sampling lawsuits are all over the place. But I think what Brendan might be thinking is the fact that you can't copyright or patent a genre of game, and so you can't copyright you can't copyright roguelike, you can't copyright RPG, you can't copyright first-person shooter, and so yeah, you do get clones, but you also get people who like that genre and want to do something unique and fun with it. And this is something that he doesn't. I don't know if he understands that that's how genres work or what, because it seems like what he wants to do is be able to shut down games like Fortnite because they're copying his formula. Because he goes on to say, he says some amazing games pass under the radar, then someone else takes the idea, has a marketing budget, and suddenly has a popular game because they ripped off someone else's idea. And I think that's something the industry needs to look at. I would say probably the biggest case of this that I can think of, and it's not really someone bigger coming in and ripping them off. It's just the game Threes, and this is a game where you have tiles with a number on them, and you swipe the board in order to combine numbers into a bigger number, and so you combine like numbers into bigger numbers, and you keep combining them until you get a big score out of it. And this was a game that was released and people liked it. And then another game came out which was called 2048, which was the exact same game, just with a slightly different way of adding the numbers up. Where Threes was based off of the power of 3, 2048 was based off the power of 2. And And so, but 2048 exploded in popularity, while as Threes was only popular with a smaller group of people that were in the know. And there were a lot of people out there that knew where 2048 got its inspiration from. They knew that it was a clone of Threes, but there were a lot of people that never even heard of Threes, and they only heard of 2048. Whereas the other way wasn't true. Like, if you heard of Threes, you also heard of 2048. But if you heard of 2048, you're not necessarily familiar with Threes. And but the reason 2048 was able to succeed, whereas Threes didn't, I think, was because Threes was a paid-for app. You had to spend, I think it was $2 or $3. I forget what it was. But with 2048, it was free with ads. And so that's an example of somebody ripping off another game and becoming more successful in this. But Threes wasn't that unsuccessful a game. The developer was able to make enough money to keep going and make more games. But yeah, so that happens. But I don't think it's that bad of a thing. If you're a one-person team or a five-person team, yeah, you're not going to have the marketing budget of EA or Activision or even a smaller indie company like I lost the developer I had in mind, but there's game companies out there that have a bigger budget with you, and that's always going to be true. But you do have intellectual property protection through copyright. People can't just wholesale lift your art assets or just reskin your game and release it. They have to do something different. There's been a number of cases where copyright law has allowed developers to shut down other projects that are too closely resembling the source material. There's a Tetris. There's a guy who made a game called Tetramino, which was basically a Tetris clone, which everybody's made at some point. Or it feels like everybody has made a Tetris clone at some point, but they were able to shut it down because it was too close to the actual Tetris formula. And this is something that even the judge said, you could have done a number of things to make this game different enough that that you wouldn't have been sued, but you decided to make it as close to Tetris as possible, and that's where your problem was. And so yeah, I think Player Unknown, if they wanted to make some claims, they probably could shut down a few of these projects. But seriously, to think that there's absolutely no copyright protection and that copyright should cover just abstract ideas like genre or play modes, no, that's not what copyright should be for, and it never should be for that. So that's what I wanted to say about that. I think that again, I think that we shouldn't try to expand copyright. We should actually be trying to shrink it down, reduce what it covers, reduce the length of copyright, get rid of things like the DMCA and anti-circumvention and all of that. So yeah. Oh, let's see. Let's move on to my next topic, which is Patreon. I have a Patreon account. If you're interested in supporting me, it's a Patreon/Easy Night. And my goal is to make one game a month. And unfortunately, I haven't done anything with it since I switched it to that because I had a number of computer issues, and then I had some family things come up in November, and so yeah. So unfortunately, haven't been able to make a game yet. But I'm planning on starting fresh in January for the new year, and my goal is to make one game a month in the year of 2018. And so I want to make 12 games. And so, yeah, so if you're interested in that idea and you want to support me, help me out in that regard, you can check out my Patreon. But that's beside the point. That's just a little self-promotion there. What I wanted to talk about was last week, Patreon decided to change the way it charges users to support people on Patreon. And the way they were doing it before was that they just charged people a flat fee. So like if you pledged $1 to somebody on Patreon, you paid $1. And if you pledged $10, you paid $10. And what happened after that is that on the receiving end, on the creator end, we would get that dollar minus 5% for the Patreon's fee, which would be, out of $1, that's 5 cents. And then they would have a flexible transaction fee based on what the credit card companies charge Patreon to run that card, and that could range between 2 and 10%. So you could be off a $1 pledge, you could be getting as much as 93 cents to as little as 85 cents, and so but Patreon decided they were going to change things up because a lot of people have their accounts set up to where they only charge their users once a month, and anybody that supports over a certain level could get access to all the Patreon goods immediately. And what was happening were a lot of people were pledging at the at the minimum amount to get access to all the unique content, all the Patreon exclusive content, and they would get that for free for that first however many days, and then just before the end of the month they would cancel their pledge so they wouldn't get charged. And this was causing a lot of problems because on November 28th you were on schedule to get $2,000, but when December 1st rolled around and pledges were charged, you would only get $1,500, and you just lost $500 that you were expecting and had made plans to spend. And this was causing a lot of issues, and people were, and Patreon did something smart. And something that was very well received was that when somebody pledged during the middle of the month, they would get immediately charged for 1 month's pledge. And so that way, that money automatically got given to the creator, and so they weren't out that. So even if that person did cancel their pledge before the end of the month, they still got something off of that person who accessed the content that was exclusive for supporters. And so this was a good deal for creators, but it introduced a new problem where if somebody pledged on, say, somebody pledged the last week of a month, they would get charged the full month fee, and then a week later get charged another full month fee. And this was something that Patreon was not. They didn't like this. They didn't have any complaints from creators, but they would get a lot of people complaining, a lot of patrons, a lot of supporters complaining about this. And so Patreon decided to change the way that pledges were charged. And instead of taking that transaction fee out of instead of doing whatever else they had thought of, they decided that they were going to charge people on their anniversary date instead of at the first of the month. So if you pledged on the 25th of the month, you would get charged the 25th of the month after that, like every 25th. And and so on, whatever time of the, whatever day of the month, that's when you would get charged. But that meant that people would have to run their card more often, and it totally threw out of whack the transaction fees. And so what Patreon decided to do was, in order to stabilize that, was they were going to charge supporters an additional fee on top of what they pledge to cover transaction fees. And this fee was 2.9% of the pledge plus another 35 cents. And so if you are supporting someone for just $1, you would end up paying another 38 cents on top of that dollar. So $1.38 instead of just $1. And that would happen every single month. And if you're supporting multiple patrons, at $1 level, say you're supporting 10 people, that's another $3 or $38. That's a lot of money. Well, not $38. I don't know what I'm thinking. Yeah, well, no. See, 35 cents times 10 is $3.50 plus another 3 cents times 10, which is 30. Yeah, so $3.80 on top of the $10 that you were pledging. So that was just completely, like, the entire internet, the entire Patreon community just said, no, you didn't talk to us. We didn't accept this. And so for an entire week, the internet was just exploding over people talking about how dumb this was. And there were a lot of people, a lot of creators who had people cancel their pledges, and so reducing the income of their pledge. And there was also a lot of people who reduced their pledge amount to make up for the fee. I don't know what the minimum is that Patreon charges. I think $1 might have been it, but there were a lot of people who were paying $2 or whatever, and they reduced it down to $1.75 or something like that. And people were just not happy. And I think the people who were least happy about it were actually the creators, because the creators have already calculated in these transaction fees. They've been doing this for a couple of years now, where they expected X amount of money to come out, to be taken out of their pledges, and to go towards transaction fees. And creators were perfectly fine with that setup. They just consider it the cost of doing business. And I think the creators looked at this change as a blow to their fans. And, to me, it seems like Patreon underestimated the bond that creators have with their supporters, with their fans. And creators, the vast majority of creators, were more than willing to take that hit for their fans, so that their fans weren't put out. If all a fan could do was, to support their favorite creator, was pay $1 a month, that's all the creators wanted to charge their fan. And they didn't want to charge them $1.38. They wanted to charge them just $1. And so a lot of creators were adjusting their pledge tiers in order to they were trying to adjust their pledge tiers to accommodate this fee change, and it threw everything out of whack. And so earlier this week, Patreon decided they weren't going to do it. So here's a few notes from them. It says they've spent hours and hours on the phone with creators, and so have the Patreon team. So this is from one specific person, Jack Conti. And it says that your feedback has been crystal clear. So the new payment system disproportionately impacted $1 to $2 patrons, and we have to build a better system for them. Aggregation is highly valued, and we understand that. Fundamentally, creators should own the business decisions with their fans, not Patreon. We overstepped our bounds and injected ourselves into that relationship against our core belief as a business. So yeah, so they do recognize that that they didn't understand how much patrons or creators love their fans and were willing to do this. It says we recognize that we need to be better at involving you more deeply and earlier in these kinds of decisions and product changes. Additionally, we need to give you a more flexible product and platform to allow you to own the way you run your memberships. And so yeah, so this is something that they're going to have to figure out. And I can understand where they were coming from with this. They don't want people pledging at the beginning of a month after charges had already been made, and then canceling before the end of the month so they never get charged but still get access to all that exclusive content. They don't want that to happen, but they also don't want people to get charged multiple times in a short period of time. And my optimal solution would be to prorate the fee, the initial fee, like the initial charge. So if you get charged, if you pledge halfway through the month, you only get charged half of what your pledge is. So if you pledge at a $10 tier and it's the halfway point of the month, you only get charged $5. And then when the first of the month rolls around and you get the full $10 charge, you're still charged what you paid. And I think that's the optimal solution, as far as I'm concerned. That would still have the result of discouraging abuse of the pledge system, and it would also mitigate the complaints of people being double charged within a short period of time, when all you could say, so if somebody does complain, you can point out that the initial charge was a prorated charge for the amount, for the time you spent during that month, and this new amount is going to be what you're going to be charged the first of the month every month following. And if they made that very clear at the point of checkout, then yeah, I think that would be very well received. There might still be a little bit of a hit when it comes to being transaction fees and stuff, but yeah, that's just something that they're going to have to deal with. So yeah, good on Patreon for recognizing that they made a mistake, but and good on them for realizing that they need to include the creators in these kind of decisions before they announce this is what we're doing. And that's definitely how they need to happen. But this has caused some trust issues between supporters and creators, and this leaves a huge gap where somebody could step in and take over this market because of this lost trust. So Kickstarter, with their drip platform that they announced a few weeks back, they could really hammer home the built-in trust they have through Kickstarter, and how that they're the trusted source. They could be the Patreon replacement that people want. And so we'll have to see how that goes and what happens with them. So let's move on to the next topic. And this one is probably the biggest news of the week, and everybody is talking about it. And this is the net neutrality. Earlier this week, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission here in the United States, has finally made their vote that they are getting rid of net neutrality. And it's it's not true net neutrality, but it is net neutrality as good as government can get it, honestly. So for those who don't fully understand net neutrality, the idea behind net neutrality is that all content should be created or should be treated equally on the internet. So if you are it doesn't matter what the service is, as long as you're not causing problems on the network, like DDoS attacks are not protected under net neutrality. Why would they be? That's actually doing harm. But streaming video, streaming audio, podcasting, articles, email, um, gaming, all of that stuff should be treated equally. ISPs should not be in the business of deciding which web services are able to pass through their lines and which web services get the fast lane and which ones get the slow lanes. That shouldn't be that is the core of net neutrality, is that if it's on the internet and it's not abusive, it's not it's not illegal content, then or illegal traffic, or however you want to describe it, then it should be allowed without hindrance. But for a while now, the FCC, Ajit Pai, I think that's how you say his name, he's the FCC director appointed by Trump. He came in with the sole purpose of undoing all of Obama's, all the regulations put into place by Obama. And that's what he voted on, what they voted on today, or this week. And the 3 Republicans on the panel voted to get rid of net neutrality. The 2 Democrats on the panel voted to keep net neutrality. And of course, when you've got a split like that, there's no way that we're going to keep net neutrality on the books. And so this is what we're stuck with. And there's a number of problems with this, and a lot of misinformation out there about what is going on. And I think what we need to focus on here is that net neutrality is a good thing, but the government's probably not your best choice for it, but it might be the only choice to preserve net neutrality on the internet. And I'm a libertarian. And I am of the opinion that the government should be doing as little as possible in interfering with markets and companies and how they do business. And so, yeah, I can understand why people would complain about a government-mandated net neutrality. But the problem we have is that we have government-mandated internet service provider monopolies. And this is where the core of the issue lies, is that 90% of the American public has either 1 or 2 ISP providers, not counting cell phone providers. Land-based, cable-based ISPs. Like most people, if you live in a big city, you probably have a cable internet and something like fiber or DSL internet. And those are your 2 options. But if you live in the sticks or a smaller town, you probably only have a DSL provider, if you have anything. My parents, they live out in, they live in the actual country, and their internet provider is a Wi-Fi based one. And they get really crappy service. They don't have a land-based internet provider. And I used to live in a town that had only 1 DSL provider, and the best connection I could get at the time, this was like 5 years ago, was 6 megabits per second. And I was paying like $60 for this. Whereas in 10 miles north of me, where people live, where the town was much larger, they had cable and DSL providers, but they were paying $60 for like 25 megabits per second. And so, yeah, that ticked me off. And that was my only internet provider. And but now I live in a town where I have two, AT&T and Cox. Right now we're Who are we with? I forget who we're getting internet with. I think it's AT&T. That's right, it's AT&T, because we did have Cox for a while, but but anytime I tried to VPN to work, my VPN connection would hold for like 15 minutes and then cut out, and I called them up and said, "Hey, your internet's screwing up my VPN," and they're like, "We don't support that on a residential network. You can't VPN. You have to get a business internet connection if you want a VPN to work." I'm like, I VPN to work like 2 or 3 times a month. I don't do this all the time. It's just when my kids are sick. They're like, "No, that's not supported. You got to pay for the business plan." And I looked at the business plan. It's 3 times as much as the residential plan for the same speeds. It was ridiculous. So I switched to AT&T, and it was, and well, we called up AT&T. I told Cox on the phone. It's like, I'm hanging up. I'm calling AT&T and switching. And I called up AT&T and I said, "Hey, do you guys, if I VPN to work on a residential plan, is that okay?" And they're like, "Why not?" And I'm like, "Okay." So we switched and never had an issue with VPN connections again after that. But still, that's 2 choices. But if AT&T blocked VPN connections too, what choice would I have had at that point? And it's the same thing with other services. If AT&T wants to block Netflix in order to push traffic towards its own streaming services, and Cox did the same, what choice would I have? And this is what net neutrality is all about, is that if you're stuck with a monopoly or a duopoly, these companies shouldn't be allowed to abuse their privilege, their monopoly privilege, and do that kind of stuff. So the core of the issue is the fact that we don't have choices in the US. And this is all the cable and telecom companies doing too. They have a massive army of lobbyists throughout the nation. They've got lobbyists at Washington, D.C., but they have lobbyists in every state capital, in every state of the U.S., writing and getting laws passed to prevent competition from rising up. Many states have passed laws that outright forbid cities from building out their own fiber networks and leasing those networks out to whatever company wants to connect users to the wider web. There are states out there with laws against that because it's somehow anti-competitive. That makes no sense at all. Saying that creating a system that allows competition is anti-competitive. And a lot of these cities that want to do it are cities where companies like Cox and Comcast and AT&T don't have internet already there. And then we have issues with Google Fiber. Google wanted to create a massive fiber network in cities all throughout the country. And they started doing it, and they started having some good successes. But then they came across laws that prevent competition again. One specific law, I forget which city this is in, but there was actually a law that says that if you want to string your fiber connection, your cable connection, whatever, on public utility poles, these are the poles that you see outside your neighbor along the roads and stuff. If you wanted to string something along those poles, you had to get the permission from the other people on that pole before you could do it. So if you want to string a pole where Cox or Comcast or AT&T or Verizon or whatever already has cables on there, you had to get their permission. You had to get them out there to move their stuff over so that you could put your stuff on there. And where, you know, and that's just a huge, huge delaying tactic put out by these companies, where they created these laws so that they could basically veto new competition. And Google tried to sue to get those laws overturned, and they lost in court, and I think they're still trying to appeal it. But the thing is that the exact same people you're hiring, the exact same contractors you're hiring to string your lines, are the exact same people and companies that your competition is going to hire to move their lines, move their equipment. So the exact same people are going to be doing both jobs and get paid by two different companies. But because Cox will delay it, they'll make up excuses why they can't get around to doing it, causing Google Fiber problems. And so this is where we're at in this country. You know, other nations have much better internet connections than we do. You know, Trump and other Republicans like to make huge deals over how awesome the United States is, where they base it on studies of that focus strictly on tightly packed cities like New York and Austin and San Francisco and stuff, where there's multiple companies there, lots of connections, high speeds, while completely ignoring 95% of the United States that has only one or two major providers. And so we're stuck with crappy internet. Whereas other countries, they have mandatory line sharing, and this is something that I support. Is that the lines themselves should be managed as a public utility, but they are basically dumb pipes where anybody can come in and say, "Hey, I'm an ISP. I will connect you to the wider web," and you could subscribe with whoever you wanted to subscribe to, whoever had the best deal, and you could switch on a drop of a hat, and it gets rid of the problem of, if you want to be a competitor in an existing market, you have to run your own fiber, which is redundant. So, if somebody else has already laid down 1 gigabit fiber in a town, why should you have to lay out your own redundant 1 gigabit fiber? Why can't you just tap into their fiber and pay a usage fee? And this is the way it should be, and this is the way a lot of cities are wanting to do, but state governments, again, are getting in the way and saying, nope, you can't do that, that's anti-competitive. So we're pretty much screwed right now. I think at this point, with the fact that the FCC got rid of net neutrality, I think what we need to do is you need to figure out what the laws are in your state regarding internet. You need to figure that out, and you need to start contacting your state representatives and asking them to get rid of these anti-competitive laws that prevent cities and other communities from creating their own networks and leasing those out. We need to get rid of those laws. We need to get rid of the laws like the one with the utility poles that Google's running up against. We need to get rid of a lot of laws out there, and we need to make the U.S. a place where competition truly thrives, where people can actually, companies can actually compete through broadband. Because what we want to see is a nation where if you want to sign up for internet, you have the choice of 5 to 10 companies to choose from rather than 1 or 2. And if there's 5 to 10 companies that you're competing with, you're bound to find the right plan for you. You're bound to find one that actually adheres to the core concept of net neutrality. And that's what we want in this country, and that's what we don't have. And if we actually had that kind of competition, there'd be no reason to get the FCC involved. But until we do, we need regulation in place to prevent those monopolies from abusing their privilege and taking advantage of us, of the people. So that's net neutrality in a nutshell. That's what I have to say. And I'm very disappointed in Ajit Pai and Trump and everything else. So it's been an hour and a little over an hour. So I think I'm going to cut it in the podcast now. No reason to go on. I only had one other thing to talk about, and that was Disney buying Fox. And it's not that huge of a story, but I might write something about it. But I had some thoughts on Twitter. So I'll close up this. This has been Molehill Mountain, episode 78. And I am Zachary Knight. If you want to follow me on Twitter, that's Knight. And I also do game development work, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast. I do this under Divine Knight Gaming, which is at divineknightgaming.com, and you can also find it on Twitter at DK_gaming. I haven't published a lot on Twitter recently. I haven't published a lot on my website either, but that's going to change in January, and I very much promise that I will make one game a month. That is my New Year's resolution, my only real New Year's resolution. But yeah. And then you can also, if you're interested in the Oakland game development scene, you can check out OK Game Devs on Twitter and okgamedev.com. I do a lot of retweeting on Twitter with that. A lot of creators, comics, artists, video game developers, and other people that I find interesting. I'll retweet what they write, what they're doing, because there's a lot of creative people in Oklahoma, and I really like the state. But yeah, at okgamedev.com, I plan on writing more throughout the next year. This year has been a really weird year for me, and I've actually fallen behind on a lot of the work that I wanted to do. But my New Year's goal is to, and we'll probably talk about this. We're not going to have a podcast next week. Because Andrew's still going to be out, and it's Christmas weekend, and I'm going to be with family. So no podcast next week, but the week after, I think we're going to do one final podcast for the year, and which is the last Saturday of the year. And I think we'll talk more about New Year's resolutions or something like that during that time, unless something really cool happens, or really weird or annoying or whatever. But I do have New Year's resolutions, and I think I'm going to, before I shut off this podcast, I'm going to, what I do. My normal New Year's resolutions are to read more books, play more games, and be happy. Those are that's what I usually put, and I typically do those things. I try to read one book a month, one new book. I focus mostly on classics, so I don't actually have to like stuff in the public domain, so I don't actually have to pay for them. But video games, I've got a huge backlog of games, and so my goal every year is to play something out of those. So play more games, read more books. But this year, definitely a New Year's resolution is to make one game a month. I want to make 12 games this year, this coming year, and I want to make some money off of it. I haven't made any money, really. I've sold like 3 copies of one of my games, which is the only game that I'm actually charging for. But I would like to see at least, couple $100 a month would be nice. More if I can. So part of that would be through Patreon. Part of it would be direct sales after that. Most of my games are just going to be put on itch.io because I don't think they're going to be that interesting, that in-depth of games. So I'm not, unless I actually make something really cool and with a lot of replayability, I'm probably not going to put it on Steam. But yeah, so I'll hopefully make a couple $100 a month off of these games. And then I also want to write at least one article a week for OK Game Devs or Random Tower, one of the two. And these are going to be things like, game reviews mostly. I might do some interviews with local game developers, but we'll see how that goes. But yeah, oh, JMac Oregon, welcome. I'm actually closing up the podcast now. But yeah, welcome. Glad you could show up. Yeah, sorry we got in late, but yeah. So that's what I plan to do. I would love to write one article a week for either side. I don't think I would be up to writing one article a week for each site, but definitely going to try to do one or the other each week. But yeah, but other than that, work on a game, get one done every month. And that's my goal for the new year. I never like to lose weight, but as a New Year's resolution, but I think that needs to be one because I'm pretty fat. For most of my life, I was under 175. But the last 5 years or so, I have like ballooned, and now I'm like 230, and I find that to me that feels unhealthy, which it probably is, and so I would like to lose at least 60 pounds over at some point, get down to 170. If I got down to 185, I would be totally stoked. But yeah, I definitely need to lose some weight. But I never like putting that down because I don't like to exercise, which is probably why I don't lose weight, which is probably why I'm so fat, is because I don't exercise. But yeah. So that's the podcast for today. That's been episode 78 of Molehill Mountain, and no podcast next week, but Andrew will be back the following week, and we will have a podcast then. So there you go. And thank you all for joining, and I will see you then. Bye.